They used to call me their miracle. I was the child they prayed for, the one they bragged about before I could even speak for myself. At family gatherings, my mother would straighten my dress and whisper, "Smile. They're watching." My father would rest a heavy hand on my shoulder and announce my grades, my awards, my future, each word spoken as if he owned it. I learned early that love in our house came with conditions. If I performed, I was praised. If I obeyed, I was adored. If I questioned, I was corrected. I grew up believing that being wanted meant being useful. By the time I reached high school, my life was already planned. The college, the degree, the career path, all chosen before I knew what I liked, what I dreamed of, or who I was when no one was watching. When teachers asked what I wanted to be, I repeated my parents' answers, because that was safer than admitting I didn't know. Every achievement became theirs. When I won scholarships, my mother said, "See what happens when you listen to us?" When I stayed up late studying, my father said, "That discipline comes from us." They never noticed how tired I was. At night, I would sit on my bed, surrounded by certificates framed by someone else's pride, wondering why success felt so empty. I loved designing, creating, imagining new things, but those were hobbies, not futures. My father laughed the first time I mentioned it. "Artists struggle," he said. "You won't embarrass this family." So I buried that part of myself quietly. I became the golden daughter instead. Perfect grades. Perfect behavior. Perfect silence. But gold is heavy when you're forced to wear it every day. The first crack appeared when I refused to sign a document my father slid across the kitchen table. It was a business form, filled with legal language I didn't understand. When I asked questions, his smile vanished. "Don't start," he said sharply. "We know what's best." For the first time, I said no. The room went cold. My mother accused me of being ungrateful. My father accused me of betrayal. They spoke as if my obedience was a debt I owed for being born into their home. That night, my mother cried loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. "You're throwing away everything we gave you," she sobbed. But what they gave me had never been freedom. From that moment on, I felt it, the shift. Conversations ended when I entered rooms. Financial support came with threats. Love became conditional paperwork. I was no longer the miracle child, I was a liability. Still, I tried to fix it. I apologized for things I didn't do. I shrank myself smaller. I silenced my dreams again. But once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. They didn't love me for who I was. They loved who I represented. And the day I stopped being useful was the day they stopped pretending. When I finally left, it wasn't dramatic. No slammed doors. No screaming goodbye. Just one suitcase, a backpack, and the sound of my mother crying behind a closed bedroom door, not for me, but for the image of me she was losing. They didn't try to stop me. That hurt more than if they had. I waited for a call that never came. No, "Are you safe?" No, "Come home." Just silence so loud it followed me into every unfamiliar room I slept in. Friends asked why my parents weren't helping, and I smiled until my cheeks ached, telling half-truths that kept their reputation intact. I protected them long after they stopped protecting me. Money ran out quickly. The bank account my father once monitored so closely was suddenly empty, frozen without explanation. I stood in line at a grocery store once, counting coins with shaking hands, realizing this was what abandonment felt like, not anger, but indifference. At night, doubt crept in. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was arrogant. Maybe I had ruined everything. I almost went back. But every time I imagined their house, I felt my chest tighten. I remembered the contracts, the control, the way love vanished the moment I resisted. Going back wouldn't save me. It would erase me. So I stayed away. I worked wherever I could, coffee shops, temp offices, late-night freelance gigs that paid too little and demanded too much. I slept on couches and borrowed beds, always apologizing for taking up space. I learned how to survive on exhaustion and hope in equal measure. There were nights I cried silently, pressing my face into a pillow so no one would hear. Nights I scrolled through old photos, wondering when I had stopped smiling for myself. And still, something stubborn inside me refused to die. In the quiet moments, on buses, between shifts, in the glow of my laptop at 2 a.m., I started creating again. Designs at first. Ideas. Notes scribbled in margins. Not because I believed in them, but because they reminded me I existed. No one applauded. No one guided me. That was the point. I failed more times than I succeeded. Projects collapsed. Clients disappeared. I doubted every decision. But every mistake belonged to me, and strangely, that made them easier to carry. One evening, as rain tapped against a borrowed window, I realized something that stopped me cold. I was still standing. Not because of them. Not because of their money or approval. But because I chose to be. They had expected me to fall apart. To return ashamed. To admit they were right. Instead, I was learning how to breathe on my own. Slowly, painfully, I began building something, not a company yet, not a dream with a name, but a foundation made of quiet resilience. I stopped waiting for permission. Stopped asking if I deserved space. I wasn't successful. I wasn't confident. But I was free. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough to keep going. Success didn't arrive with applause. It arrived quietly, like something afraid of being noticed. At first, what I was building didn't even have a name. It was just late nights and endless revisions, an idea shaped by exhaustion and stubborn hope. I worked from borrowed desks in crowded cafes, headphones on, pretending the world didn't exist. Every small victory felt unreal, my first long-term client, my first month without checking my bank balance in fear, my first time saying no to work that didn't feel right. No one knew it was me. And I wanted it that way. I registered the company under a neutral name, one that didn't carry my family's weight or expectations. I avoided interviews. Declined public credit. I had spent my whole life being visible for the wrong reasons. Now, invisibility felt like protection. As the company grew, so did my confidence, but quietly. I didn't announce milestones or celebrate loudly. I treated success like a fragile secret, afraid that if I acknowledged it too openly, it would disappear. The scars of my past taught me that anything valuable could be taken away. Sometimes, late at night, I checked my parents' social media out of habit. They still posted carefully curated images of success, still spoke about values and discipline. Occasionally, I saw hints, complaints about stolen ideas, about people who lacked loyalty. I knew they were talking about me. But they didn't know how close I was. The first time my company was mentioned in a major publication, I stared at the screen for a long time, unable to breathe. My hands shook as I scrolled, seeing my work described as innovative, bold, promising. No name attached. Just results. I didn't cry. I just closed my laptop and sat in silence, letting the truth settle. I had done this on my own. That was when the letters started coming. Legal threats, thinly veiled accusations, claims that I had misused family knowledge, family resources, family connections. They didn't know the details, but they recognized the shape of success. They always had a talent for sensing value, even if they didn't respect the person holding it. Their lawsuit felt surreal. They claimed ownership over ideas they never supported. They demanded compensation for investments they never made. Worst of all, they framed it as concern for a daughter who had lost her way. I didn't respond emotionally. I hired a lawyer. I organized records. Every contract, every timestamp, every sleepless night documented. I had learned from them how power worked. I just chose not to abuse it. Preparing for court felt like standing in the eye of a storm. Friends warned me it would be brutal. That family fights were the ugliest kind. They were right, but I wasn't afraid. For once, I wasn't fighting to be believed. I was fighting to be accurate. The night before the hearing, I slept deeply. No nightmares. No rehearsed arguments. I knew the truth, and it didn't need decoration. When I walked into the courtroom the next morning, I saw them sitting together, unified by confidence and old authority. They smiled when they saw me, sad, pitying smiles. They still thought this was about control. They didn't realize it was about exposure. And the silence before the storm was almost over. The courtroom felt smaller than I expected. The air was thick with whispers and polished wood, with the quiet confidence of people who believed they already knew the ending. My parents sat together on the plaintiff's side, shoulders aligned, faces solemn. They looked like unity. They looked like righteousness. My lawyer squeezed my arm once, a silent reminder to breathe. My mother went first. She stood slowly, as if the weight of her grief might topple her over, clutching a tissue that had never left her hand. Her voice trembled on cue. "We gave her everything," she said, glancing toward the judge, then at me. "Education. Guidance. Opportunity. And she threw it all away." My father nodded gravely beside her. "They spoke of sacrifice. Of disappointment. Of betrayal. They spoke as if I weren't in the room. When it was my turn, I stayed seated. I didn't interrupt. I didn't react. I watched the judge instead, Judge Harrison, his face unreadable as he scanned the files in front of him. Then something changed. He stopped reading. The sound of paper settling echoed louder than any gavel. "Wait," Judge Harrison said, adjusting his glasses as he looked up. "I read about this company in Forbes last week." The room froze. My mother's sob caught mid-breath. My father stiffened. The judge flipped a page, then another. "This company, founded 3 years ago, privately held, rapidly growing. Innovative leadership." His eyes lifted again, landing on me. "And according to these documents," he continued slowly, "you are the sole founder." The silence was absolute. My lawyer stood. "That is correct, Your Honor." My mother whispered, "That's not possible." Judge Harrison leaned back, studying my parents now. "Then someone here is lying to my face." My heart didn't race. It settled. I stood. "I built it after you cut me off," I said calmly. My voice carried without effort. "No family funds. No connections. No guidance. Just work." I looked at them, not with anger, but distance. "You taught me discipline," I continued. "But you never taught me trust. You taught me success, but only if it belonged to you." My father tried to speak. The judge raised a hand. I went on. "You say I threw away opportunities. What you really mean is that I stopped being obedient." I handed my lawyer the final folder. Evidence slid onto the bench: contracts, timelines, bank statements. Truth, organized. The judge reviewed everything in silence. Then he ruled. The lawsuit was dismissed. Their claims were unfounded. Their credibility, questioned. My parents didn't look at me as the gavel fell. They stared straight ahead, as if refusing to acknowledge the moment they lost control. Outside the courtroom, reporters gathered, but I walked past them. I didn't need a headline. My revenge wasn't loud. It was precise. I didn't ruin them. I didn't humiliate them publicly. I simply proved that I never needed them to become someone. As I stepped into the sunlight, I felt something I had never felt before: lightness. Not victory. Freedom. And that was the verdict that mattered most.